Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our chief guest for the session, Mr. Piyush Goyal, Minister of Railways and Coal, Government of India. Can we have a huge round of applause for sir? Welcome, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special corporate AV commemorating the 11-year-long journey of Hero Mindmine. Can we have a round of applause for the AV? And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would request our chief guest for the session, Mr. Piyush Goyal, Minister of Railways and Coal, Government of India, to kindly grace the stage. Would also request Chairman, Hero Enterprise, Mr. Sunil Kanmunjal, to join him on stage. Can we have a round of applause for both the gentlemen? Ladies and gentlemen, moving on to our final session of Hero Mindmine Summit 2018, the Valedictory session. Our chief guest for the session is Mr. Piyush Goyal, Minister of Railways and Coal, Government of India. Can we have a round of applause? Over to you, sir.
We'll have it more interactive ultimately, so just a few opening comments and then we'll interact. Yeah, that'll be good. I'll be happy to even take questions from the
if you want to make a statement,
audience. I'll just make a few comments and yeah. Thank you very much, Sunil, for of course giving me an opportunity to be amongst so many friends and so many very actively thinking persons, concerned citizens, concerned planners who are looking for a better future for the country. And thank you for keeping this Mindmine Summit so vibrant and active. It's been a great journey. I fondly recollect the last time I attended the summit. And post that, I think we even had lunch together with your very, very distinguished father and the rest of the family. And I still recall it was probably either the first year we were in government or the year before that. It was one of those 2013 or 14. And truly, I was going through the agenda of discussions and the panels that you've had over the last 2 days. This is now really maturing into a world-class think tank for which all of India can be proud. Mrs. Mehta may possibly tell Vikram afterwards that I'm trying to distinguish between indigenous think tanks and international think tanks. But I think it's important that we have think tanks which work from within India, bring out the talent from within India, and then go on to the international sphere to create an impact and take the Indian ethos worldwide. While certainly every think tank contributes deeply to human thinking, to human progress, I think each country has its own history, its own traditions, its own culture, which gets reflected in the think tank's outcomes also. And in that sense, having a few robust and very active indigenous think tanks, I think will be very useful for us policy makers. And it could be both in government or out of government. It could be industry. It could be people who are looking at the social sphere. I think in every sector, the inputs that we can get from a think tank such as yours is truly very, very important and exciting. The inputs that I have personally received from these various interactions have helped me in my work significantly. And I'm sure the deliberations of the last 2 days will also help us look at different ideas in a new light, as must have been discussed over the last 2 days. We are looking at India when we turn 75, that's 2022. It is going to be a landmark year. A lot of the programs that have been initiated towards a new India are centered around achieving significant milestones by 15th of August 2022. And in that sense, a debate on what is happening and what needs to be done differently to achieve success in making India a better country to live in, ensuring that every citizen of India has access to the basic amenities that each one of us is looking for, be it electricity, be it good housing, be it a toilet, a simple thing like a toilet in each one's homes, water, clean drinking water for every citizen, good education and healthcare in his vicinity, better connectivity to the rest of the world. I think these basic elements, that we have not been able to provide to large sections of our countrymen, fellow countrymen, despite 7 decades of post-independence India, is a big challenge that has been taken up by the country. It's a challenge that's eminently doable. We've seen some massive growth in numbers in terms of electricity access, in terms of more and more villages becoming open defecation free, in terms of providing affordable housing to large sections of people in India who could not afford it earlier, in terms of ensuring that we have more and more schemes that help reach healthcare to the people of India, particularly in rural India. And I think all of these various measures, as planned, as launched over the last few years, as they begin to bear fruit, will certainly help us take India towards the sustainable development goals that have been set by the United Nations much faster than what was planned in New York. I remember, particularly in the area of power, which until a few months ago was under me, I had been debating with the United Nations and the officials of the body which finalized the SDGs, that the world cannot wait until 2030 to provide energy access for all or electricity access for all. It's too long a target. And particularly when we are looking at many other targets being achieved by 2030, we'll actually have to prioritize what needs to be done first, what can actually have a huge impact on the lives of the people, and what can help us achieve those targets so that 2030 is an end date, not only for a few successes, but for all of them to be successful. And in that sense, possibly a PERT chart which would prioritize, which would go to the root cause of why large parts of the world have been left behind the development race, would be great if a think tank like Mindmine would actually consider fleshing out the detail from the SDGs and seeing how India can actually reach out much faster than what has been planned by the rest of the world. I remember in an interaction at Davos, where the World Bank president was also there at an early morning breakfast meet on financial inclusion. And here I'm talking of 2015. Soon after Honorable Prime Minister and Honorable Finance Minister had launched the Jan Dhan Yojana, the financial inclusion plan by which we were trying to make sure at the first stage every household has at least one bank account. Now, of course, we've moved much further ahead from there. Currently, we've been able to open nearly 340 million bank accounts under the Jan Dhan Yojana over the last 3.5 years. 340 million accounts. But I remember in January of 2015, it was just about 4 months since we had launched the Jan Dhan Yojana. September 14 or thereabouts, we launched Jan Dhan with a target that every household should have one account. And when I gave the statistics in January 15 at that forum, the World Bank president was actually amazed. He said, I can't believe that India could roll out, I think at that point of time it was about 100 million Jan Dhan accounts or so. And we had crossed 99% of households having an access to a bank account. And they truly could not believe that this can be the scale at which a developing country like India can take financial inclusion to the masses, to the people of India. And there they were struggling to see how the world can ensure financial literacy and inclusion over a 10 or 12-year horizon. I'm delighted that on many aspects, India has been able to make very rapid strides towards our goal for a more prosperous India, for a more developed India, towards a new India by 2022. When I look at the figures of open defecation-free villages, and I see a figure of nearly 380,000 villages now being free of open defecation, it really makes you proud as an Indian citizen. When we look at Saubhagya being launched, by which we are wanting to guarantee every willing consumer an electricity connection. And all those who are poor, getting it free of charge completely. All those who come within the parameters of SECC. And even for the others, a nominal charge of 50 rupees a month for 10 months. But access will be given free of charge at the first instance to every household along the chain. And that's a great departure from the past. I don't know if any of you remembers, and very often this is a matter that we discuss on many forums, that public memory being short, it's very difficult for people to remember those bad old days when you were perpetually having power shortages in the country. From moving away from those shortages, we have now reached a situation that most power companies are under stress for their inability to sell enough power, what they can produce. But I think that's a great situation to be in. And that actually encourages policymakers to start looking at giving an electricity connection to every consumer in the country. And I remember when I became a minister and when we first embarked on ensuring that up to the village level, we ensure every village gets connectivity. And the Prime Minister had announced that the last 18,452 villages be guaranteed electricity access in 1,000 days. Those 1,000 days are going to get over soon. And by last count, I think out of those 18,452 villages, and then we added a few numbers where we found more villages which were wrongly declared as electrified. We have actually come down to a small level of probably 150 or 200 villages which are left. More so because these are in the very deep interiors of Arunachal Pradesh, some of them in the left-wing extremism areas. But otherwise, we've been able to reach out electricity to every village across the country. And these were clearly the difficult ones, the ones which were left behind even 70 years after independence. Top of a mountain, many places our officers used to actually carry transformers. Just like you take a palanquin to Vaishno Devi, they actually carried transformers and cables and poles on their shoulders to reach remote areas which had no access, but ensured that we could take electricity across the length and breadth of the country. And now in the second phase, we have rewritten the rules of an electrified village to say that we should not only electrify a village under the traditional definition of available access, 10% of the households getting electrified, but make sure that every house gets an electric connection, a legal electricity connection. And Saubhagya has been launched at an investment of about nearly $3 billion. And our expectation is that by March 2019, we should be able to get almost a near 100% achievement, that every willing consumer across the country gets a formal, official electricity connection. And it's eminently doable. We are working with the states, we are working aggressively with the states to make sure that the states carry this program right up to every household. In fact, rather than waiting for people to approach the government for electricity, we've advised all the state governments to hold camps in every village and invite people in the camp to come and take an electricity connection with the least amount of paperwork. You literally give your name, address, possibly a few more details, which would not be more than a 2 or 3 minute process, and you'll be eligible for a power connection. I remember in the old days, we even had this problem of illegal slums or illegally occupied places not getting eligibility for electricity because they could not prove their ownership. So we actually suggested to states that you could de-link ownership and electric connection. So having an electricity connection will not be proof that you are a resident or the owner of a piece of land or a property. But why should we deprive anybody of electricity? And that same trajectory of rapid deployment on the ground, you can see in so many areas across government. I mean, I remember the optic fiber cable figures. I wouldn't have the most latest number. But when we came into government, we had only about 358 kilometers of optic fiber laid out, which had crossed over 200,000 kilometers about 6 or 8 months ago. More than 200,000 kilometers. Right now it must be some 270 or 280,000 kilometers. The pace of growth at which India can transform itself is immense. It's for all of us to believe in ourselves. It's for all of us to accept our ability to have a transformed India by 2022, when India turns 75. It's for all of us to be willing to change the rules of the game, where instead of preferential treatment or privileges, we are all willing to work on an equal opportunity framework, where everybody gets an equal opportunity to enjoy the fruits of development, to participate in the growth story, to have access to the natural resources of this country. And I believe the last 4 years, where this government has focused its energies on creating a sustainable framework which will prepare India for an honest tomorrow, which will prepare India that everybody will have equal opportunity in any business, any proposal, any aspect of India's development, rather than keeping development the privy of maybe a few privileged individuals or a class of individuals. And it is that transparent framework which Prime Minister Modi and his team have been focusing on putting all our efforts in, a transparent framework in which we can truly take development to the nook and corner of the country, a framework in which even a thing like cleanliness, swachhata, becomes a part of the thinking of the nation. Because unless we have a mindset which is clean, unless we have a mindset which is able to think clean, we will not be able to transform this nation. And many people did not realize it, but I believe when Prime Minister Modi was propagating cleanliness, it was not only that the whole country should be clean like the Taj Palace is today, and it's not as if we are only a privileged set of people who are going to get the benefit of a clean environment, but every section of society should have a right to a clean country, a clean nation. And that is where people's participation in this transformation journey becomes even more important. In fact, we have just completed the 100-year celebration of the Champaran Satyagraha. And really, the Champaran Satyagraha was all about a people's movement. Independence is possible, and the belief in the people of India that independence is possible in India was really propagated when the Champaran Satyagraha became a mass movement in the country. And what Prime Minister Modi said, that when we are celebrating 100 years of the Champaran Satyagraha, can we take Satyagraha to Swachhagraha, where the country now plans and a collective people's movement to make India a clean nation. And when we talk of a clean nation, it also equally is important that we look at a clean nation where probity in public life, transparency, honesty in processes is equally important as we move towards a better future for the people of India. The various social programs, the various efforts to clean up the banking system, to clean up the way natural resources were given out in the past, to clean up government interference in the day-to-day lives of the people of India, to clean up utilization of government resources, government funding. All of these efforts, I'm sure, will collectively help this nation go to the next level. And 2022 as a benchmark year, when India turns 75, is a great target to have. A country free of corruption, a country free of communalism and casteism, a country where everybody has a home of their own with electricity and clean drinking water, where everybody has access to good quality healthcare, good quality education. I think it's an aim which is eminently doable. And when we all collectively put our heart and soul in this, I am very confident that come 2022, the Mindmine Summit will be doing an analysis and an assessment of how this journey progressed to ensure a brighter and a better future for 1.25 billion people in this country. My best wishes to Mindmine in the journey going forward. I do hope some of your thoughts can go into this journey and what more could be done, how we could prioritize these efforts so that the jigsaw puzzle probably falls into place and your Rubik's Cube reaches its end game when we are on 15th August 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Piyush. That was brilliant as always. You know, when we talked of the concluding session, we normally like to call somebody who will leave an impact. So we are looking at a list of names, because apparently I was told you were going to be out of town. And when it came to your name, the 5 people who were sitting in the room all said, yes, you should call him. So you're an interesting character. You were born in politics. You know, your father's been in politics. He was a minister in the government. Your mother was a 3-time MLA. But you walked off in a different direction. You were a brilliant chartered accountant. I believe you were second All India or some such, right? And then you went into this leadership program at Princeton, at Yale, at Harvard. And clearly you do believe in education. You sent your children to Harvard. You were in business. You apparently were a successful banker. So what is it that drew you back into what has been the family's passion, back into the toughest form of public service? Because politics in India is not just about doing things. It also, in a sense, requires you to have a thick skin. You are an easy, soft target. People will take pot shots at you, and you face some in your political career. What is it that drove you to this? Can we get this mic on, please?
But I think very early on in life, I was privileged to have the opportunity of interacting with stalwarts like Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee and many of our leaders of the RSS family. And I could see that the kind of passionate nationalism that Atalji had and other leaders of the RSS had when we used to interact with them at a young age, the kind of sacrifices many of them had done, leaving very lucrative potential careers, sacrificing their entire life in the service of the nation. It always felt that there's a larger calling in life beyond making money. Of course, I would not belittle the importance of money in any of our lives. We all need a fair amount of money to lead a decent life. And I was privileged that while I was embarking on my political journey, I was able to do my own business successfully, build up my capital, so that when it came to an opportunity to work for government, money was not a stress for the family. And I often suggest to all my young friends that you must take an interest in politics, even though you may get pot shots, even though you may have politicking. And today, of course, we've reached the depth of politicking where, in fact, the Supreme Court is being attacked. The highest judicial forum in the country is being attacked. And I don't know if we are looking at going back to the emergency days when there was talk of a committed judiciary. I wonder whether there is an effort that there should be a judiciary which only gives judgments which I like. It's my way or the highway. If a judgment is given which is not suitable to my political interests, whether we can start attacking the judiciary. It's really a very unfortunate day that we are concluding this Mindmine summit. And possibly you may like to actually have an interaction on the future of judicial independence under the Mindmine Summit platform.
Good point.
But I felt that the larger calling in life and the ability to impact people's lives in politics is more than any other field. And from a young age, of course, interacting with people in public life, there was an interest that developed. And I remember in 2014 talking to my wife and my 2 children and asking their permission that, look, if I join government, then our lifestyle changes and it needs a buy-in of the whole family. And we almost spent 4-5 days talking about it amongst the family. I remember one day my daughter was much younger at that time. Actually, early morning is asking me, when you talk of lifestyle change, what do you mean? I said, it means that we can't have the kind of holidays we used to have all these years and just at the drop of a hat, just go anywhere and take time off. But fortunately, the family has been very supportive. And I think it's been 4 years well spent. I've enjoyed my work. The Honorable Prime Minister has reposed great faith and given me an opportunity to address some of the biggest challenges that the nation faced. And I do have a sense of, I would say, some satisfaction, but also a desire to do lots more in the years to come.
I want to take off from a point you made about politics. It's often been said now that politics has become adversarial, exceedingly adversarial. It has become personal, it has become negative, and the mode of communication has become attack. That each political formation is attempting not only to talk about their own program. In fact, we had some conversation on this earlier in the day in 2 of the sessions actually, but trying to point a finger at what are you doing wrong. What do you think is the method for us as India, as Indians? Because this is one of the things, the think tank Mindmine, by the way, has an interesting mandate. Its mandate is India, Indians, Indian economy, and India's global relations. So everything with India and Indians at the center of it. So what is it that you think can be done to bring this to a more even keel? Politicking is, of course, necessary. And I want to just leave one more part to this. So we actually tried this, some of us in the last 3 governments or 4 governments now, because in most major democracies, there is a tacit understanding between the ruling and the opposition formations that these are 4, 5, 10 or 15 things which we all know are good for our nation. So we will support them inside and outside of parliament or whatever the system is in the country. For the rest of it, we will of course put our point of view across. How do we get to that point in India?
A very good point you have raised, Sunil. In fact, it is precisely the reason why the Honorable Prime Minister has advocated a debate and a dialogue amongst well-meaning people in the country, whether it's time that we looked at simultaneous elections from panchayat to parliament, so that at every level we have elections simultaneously, and then the government of the day then works through a period without this continuous politicking. Ultimately, if you see, even in the last 4 years, if you look at the working of the last 4 years, the first 3 years, by and large, we were able to do a lot of things on consensus. I believe the highest number of constitutional amendments and changes in law and policy have happened between 2014 and 17, with unanimous consensus being built up. GST, can't get a more difficult example than GST, where every political dispensation was on the table. Every state had an equal voice. And there were all unanimous decisions taken with all the states, differing political ideologies, coming to terms on a new tax regime. Similarly, the Bangladesh border dispute, the NJAC, there have been a series of the Campa law, utilization of the environmental funds collected almost, I believe, 40,000 crores or something. All of these were unanimous decisions. I believe it's just a series of political defeats that the opposition faced, and with an impending election coming up in 2019, that possibly politics has overtaken national interest. And we've come to a situation where policy, public good, national interest, all of these are being left on the wayside. And everything is now about politics. Very unfortunate, though.
A much more personal question. If I remember, from much younger days, your dimensions were a little bit different. Your dimensions were a little bit different. You've become much slimmer now and much fitter. What is it you did?
No, I was actually quite thin many years ago. To the extent, on a lighter note, in our RSS Shaka, earlier we used to have half pants. Now, of course, they've changed to full pants. But I still remember when I was a school and college going boy, I was so lean and thin that I was very embarrassed to wear that half pant. And I used to argue and fight with my leaders of the RSS that why don't you allow full pant or trousers? और मेरे बड़ा झगड़ा होता था इस विषय पे. But possibly over the years you put on weight a little bit. But I think the good part is that my wife makes sure that I have my juices in the morning and my almonds in the morning and the fruit in the morning. Reasonably good diet regimen, a good exercise regimen which helps to keep you active through the day.
But you do maintain a pretty punishing schedule. From whatever I've seen of your work timing, you seem to work a very long number of hours. And anytime I've met you or heard of you, of other people meeting, you're always doing more than one thing at a time. And you carry on with meetings, not just in the daytime, but very late to apparently you don't leave files pending the next day. Is that correct?
Well, I think it's an opportunity of a lifetime. Very rarely does one get an opportunity to be able to really serve at the levels at which I've been privileged to work in the last 3 or 4 years. In fact, I'm grateful to the people of India for the kind of trust that they've reposed in us and the kind of support we get while we are making all of these decisions or working on so many ideas. And I think the adrenaline just comes from the opportunity itself. And long hours is something which I think my father would have ingrained in me much earlier, right in school and college. So it's not a big deterrent, but it's a great joy when you see your efforts fructifying into outcomes, into results. The joy you get when you see a village getting electrified, first time after 7 decades. The joy when you meet a child when you're going towards some coal mine area and he says that I go to a school run by the coal company, or this home that I'm living in has been provided to me, or the toilet in my school has been provided by a power company under you. The joy of giving back to society, and this society has given me and all of us in this room so much that I think there can be no greater joy than participating in this journey. And with friends like all of you, I have full confidence that India at 75 is truly going to be a new India, an India that we can all be proud of.
So, just for your information and also for the audience, I will try and give a brief summary of what went on between yesterday and today, and so that you get an idea of the kind of work or kind of discussion that took place. It was actually quite unique. As I said at the beginning yesterday, that over the period of 11 years, 12 years now, this has become a unique, neutral platform where people with all points of views are able to come and express their views. Even ministers and politicians who are not in the government, someone said, are expressing views in a more relaxed manner, whether their views agree or don't agree with each other. And sometimes are able to say things which they don't otherwise say, despite the cameras and the recordings being here as well. So we are actually proud of the fact that this has developed into probably India's largest independent neutral platform. When I'm saying independent, I'm saying independent of the media houses because they all run amazing conferences. There's also large conferences run by CII, FICCI, SHM, etc. This, I think, is the largest of its kind now. And this is other than the work which is done during the year. Those are little bits and pieces. Besides what we call the Mindmine Summit, we also now run something called the Mindmine Conversations. The Mindmine Conversations are a much smaller conversation in a closed door. So we've done them in Delhi, in Mumbai, in Hyderabad, and using the strength of the area. So in Mumbai, we had a big focus on the financial services, on Hyderabad, on infrastructure, so looking at different things. And those allow us to feed more material into how the structure of the overall summit gets designed. The summit itself picks one broad theme, and every session looks at the theme from its own perspective. Each time there are 3 to 5 members on a panel here, and of course there are some one-on-ones like this one as well. And except the opening and the closing, there are no speeches at all. We neither permit PowerPoint presentations or speeches, just so that it remains and actually remains a conversation, which makes it more engaging and more interesting, I believe, for the audience. And this is a format increasingly more and more conferences now have begun to follow. So I will just walk you through some of what happened here. So Ravi Shankar Prasadji was here at the opening session yesterday, and he made an interesting comment. Besides telling us about the programs that are going on with the government, he spoke in detail about his own ministries, the 2 areas that he handles, because the digital world is increasingly becoming not just intriguing, it's both fascinating for opportunities and a big scare as a threat. At the same time, people don't know what kind of privacy they have or do not have because of the ability of the digital system to reach right into our homes and into our pockets through our smartphones. He also spoke about what the Aadhaar as a system can do for us and how to allay people's fear that it is pretty safe in the way it's designed and set up. He made an interesting comment. He said, today, India's clout is increasingly matching its size. Post that, we had a next session which was called The Road to India at 75. So Ronojoy said, he talked about the economic conditions of India's journey and how, what lies ahead for us in terms of development. So then all the 3 or 4 speakers spoke from their perspective. The SBI chairman was here. So he supported the ongoing policy reform program and said it is now getting to reach the bottom of the pyramid. Whereas Yamini Iyer said there is a stark difference of development that you can see in the metros, and then the smaller towns are quite different. It's not really the same kind of level of development at all. And Akhil, head of KPMG India, so he argued that growth is really not possible without getting to the bottom of the pyramid, and this is what we are doing. And that's how the actual growth is starting to trigger big changes in this country. And the next session was on what was called cityfication of India, because it is clear as any nation has evolved and developed at roughly the point we are, urbanization becomes a big theme. For us, we are going to see, the largest migration mankind has seen on this planet ever in the next 25 to 30 years take place in India, and which is the movement of people from the rural to the urban areas. Till a few years ago, 72% of India lived in the rural areas. We're now at 68 or 67 point some and dropping. It's commonly believed that this number will come to 50% in the rural and 50% in the urban areas. And by the way, we are talking of a large number. We are larger than multiple countries put together. So at this moment, our urban infrastructure is not at all ready. It's already creaking, the urban infrastructure. So here is a great threat and an amazing opportunity. So which is why the Smart Cities program was very well timed. We need to figure out how to activate this quickly. So we had Milind Deora, who talked of lack of authority at the local government level, which causes complication in the development of urban areas. And he said too many people and authorities are in control while no single one appears accountable. Sunita Narayan talked of how this development needs to be balanced and also affordable, and to keep the environment in mind as we move forward. Minister Hardeep Puri was here, and he talked of the multi-layered system which operates and how that is being actioned to become more effective. And then he, of course, spoke about the flagship program of smart cities. The next session was on risks, threats, and cyclicality. So this panel spoke about the geopolitical risks, the cyber threats, and disruptions that are likely to be caused through technology. Prashant Nair spoke about the world that we're living in. He asked, is this a world which is much more risky than anything we've had in the past? And Abhik Barua responded by then spelling out the global risks as he sees them. And he said there's one we seem to miss out when we talk about these. Protectionism is a big, big risk. Today, many champions of the free world are becoming protectionists. So that's something we need to live with and also work with to make that a much more open world. Nilesh Shah felt that we are much better equipped today to fight or tackle these risks. And the panel overall agreed about the kind of risks we have. And Mrityunjay Kapoor talked of the rising risk of cyber attacks, which are now quite commonplace. The number is increasing year on year, every year. The next session talked of turning the wheels on investment. And Jayant Sinha was in this session. He spoke about the magical outcome of the likely implementation of the JAM Trinity program and a whole host of other things. He also spoke, of course, about what's going on in the area of aviation, which can dramatically change life for many Indians. Bharat Shah talked of the dramatic reforms that have taken place, whether it was the GST, the RERA, the insolvency, bankruptcy code, etc. Because what actually happens, I think, is because we're living in the middle of it, sometimes you don't tend to notice, except everybody, of course, spoke about demonetization and GST. But the reality is, if you think about this, we had done this, and I mentioned this yesterday, we had done this study January of last year. We found there were 130 major reforms which had already taken place in the 3 years then. Now, the total number of major reforms is about 300. It is pretty mind-boggling. If you take a step back and come back from outside, if you come to India after 3 or 4 years, the pace is blistering. And I do believe that in the next decade, this country will look completely, completely different. It may not be a fully developed country still because of our extreme diversity, but it would have moved a long way down this road. And our development model, I do believe, has to be our development model. We cannot replicate another one because we are different in the sense of being continental in size, proportion, and in the way we look, feel, and behave. The next one was an interesting Mindmine exchange on harnessing legacy. And this spoke about, can our artisanal past craft an exciting future? We had Minister Smriti Irani here with us and Rajiv Sethi on this panel. And both of them, of course, agreed that we need to do more. There was some difference on how and who needs to do it, the role of the private sector, the government roles. Is the government doing enough? And the private sector certainly does not seem to be doing enough. But there are some sparks which are now seen at different parts of India. And interestingly, actually in the subcontinent, there are some new initiatives going on. So hopefully we will see the strength of India's culture and history come to be our strength in the future as well. The next was, how do we reimagine learning in India? Talking about the future. So we had Saurabh Srivastava and Dharmendra Pradhanji here in this session. And we had Professor Errol D'Souza, the director of IIM Ahmedabad. They talked of too much accent on the kind of schooling, the kind of number markings, the kind of cramming that we do. And some of them felt, frankly, growing up in real life is a great education. So we need to focus a little bit more than just academics, and we also need to understand technology is a big driver of this in the future. So I'm not going to go through every session with you, but just to tell you that each session had this kind of detailed discussion on the very theme of what is likely to happen over the next few years, so that when India does hit 75, we are in a position to hold our heads high and say, we are proud of this nation that we inherited from our forefathers, and we are leaving a nation behind for our children in the future, which is better than what we got. And hopefully every next generation in the future will be able to say this. So we did have an interesting discussion on politics in the morning when we had Manish Sisodia, Sambit Patra, and Dipender Huda here with us in the morning with the session moderated by Aditi Fadnis. That turned a little bit into almost like a TV session. It started off quite civilized, I have to say, in the early part of the session. But towards the latter part, it became a little bit like a to and fro, which again started taking hard political positions without saying so. So that was the point I was trying to make to you, Piyush, earlier, that can our politicians see beyond their political dispensation of a party? Can we try and look at this as a broader responsibility that each individual leader has in his or her area of domain? Because eventually you're a leader of all the people in your domain, not of one type of people or one frame of thought. So we've had some pretty engaging discussions. We will feed this back into the system, wherever it needs to go to policymakers, government, industry bodies, etc., and to civil society. We do try and provide this feedback, but we find this a very enriching experience. We find that we are constantly learning more. Our themes sometimes have been a little bit ahead of their time, as you saw in the film at the beginning, that these themes are usually very timely, very topical, but we've tried to remain neutral. We've not got overexcited when the temporary high was there. We've not got overly disappointed when the situation in those years was down. We've tried to maintain some kind of an even keel, because that is necessary for us also to be able to plan ahead and certainly to implement any plans that get made. But thank you very much for being here with us at the concluding session. Thank you for the wonderful message that you're giving us about what is being done today to build an India more dynamic, and an India thriving on ideas, an India thriving and growing on the base of its own, very own people and their energy. I do think we are a nation which is just an idea. We are a nation where people have a unique ability to multitask. We are a people, we are a civilizational in our thinking and behavior. So there are just so many strengths that we have that sometimes it becomes distressing to see the situation around us is not moving rapidly enough to take care of our biggest challenge, that you still have Indians living in disadvantaged positions economically. Now, regardless of background, caste, creed, color, region, we need to figure out a way how all Indians live at least a minimum standard of life, and then post that, use their individual enterprise to build an India of all our dreams. So thank you all very much. Thank you for being here with us for 2 days, and we hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.